Could we live without mitochondria? The short answer is no, not for a second. It's not just that it would be difficult. It would be impossible for us, as we are, to exist. A human cell without mitochondria is a dead cell. And a human made of dead cells is a corpse. That's the blunt truth of it. But the question is more interesting than a simple yes or no. The full story tells you what life is, it tells you where we came from, and it tells you what it means to be a complex, thinking, moving creature. To understand why we can't live without them, you first have to know what they are. You probably heard the line in school, mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. It's a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true. It just doesn't capture the whole picture. It's like saying a heart is a pump. True, but it doesn't tell you about love or heartbreak. Think of your body as a massive, bustling city. This city is made of trillions of tiny buildings. These buildings are your cells. Each cell has a job. A muscle cell is a factory. A nerve cell is a communication tower. A liver cell is a detoxification plant. Every single one of these buildings needs electricity to run its lights, its machines, its computers. Without power, the city goes dark. The factories stop. The towers go silent. Everything grinds to a halt. Mitochondria are the power plants. They are not just in one central location. Every building, every single cell has its own fleet of them. Some have a few hundred. Others, the ones with really demanding jobs like muscle cells, can have thousands. They're tiny oval-shaped structures floating around inside the cell, and their one main job is to take the food you eat and the air you breathe and turn it into energy. The food we eat, whether it's a donut or a piece of broccoli, gets broken down into simple molecules, mostly a sugar called glucose. The air we breathe gives us oxygen. Mitochondria take this glucose and oxygen and run them through a complex series of chemical reactions. It's like a tiny, incredibly efficient furnace. The output isn't fire or smoke. The output is a special molecule called ATP. ATP is the electricity of your cells. It's the universal energy currency for almost all life on Earth. Every time a muscle contracts, it spends ATP. Every time a nerve fires, it spends ATP. Every time your cells build a new protein or repair a bit of damage, they pay for it with ATP. You are spending billions of these molecules in every cell every single second. And mitochondria are the ones making it. They are constantly recharging your cellular batteries. Without them, your cells would have a backup generator. But it's a terrible one. There's a way to get a tiny bit of energy from glucose without oxygen, a process called glycolysis. It happens outside the mitochondria. It's fast and dirty. For every one molecule of glucose, this backup process makes just 2 units of ATP. It's enough to keep a very simple organism alive for a little while, but mitochondria, they take that same molecule of glucose and, using oxygen, wring out about 36 units of ATP. It's a staggering difference in efficiency. It's the difference between lighting a room with a single candle versus flipping a switch and turning on a floodlight. The energy from mitochondria is what allows for complexity. It's what allows cells to group together to form tissues. Tissues to form organs. Organs to form a human being who can run a marathon or compose a symphony. All of that is powered by these tiny organelles. A life powered only by the backup generator would be slow, small, and simple. It would not be human life. So that's the first reason. Energy, without mitochondria, we would have no power. We would experience a total, instantaneous, system-wide blackout. But that's not even the whole story. Mitochondria are much more than simple power plants. They are deeply woven into the fabric of our cells. To really get it, you have to go back in time, way back, about 2 billion years ago. Back then, life on Earth was simple. It was all single-celled creatures. There were bacteria, and there were slightly larger, more complex cells that would eventually give rise to animals, plants, and fungi. One day, one of these larger cells did something that changed the history of life. It engulfed a smaller bacterium. Normally, the big cell would have just digested the small one, eaten it for lunch. But for some reason, this time, it didn't. The little bacterium survived inside its host. And a deal was struck. It was a partnership. The host cell provided a safe place to live and plenty of raw materials. In return, the bacterium, which was an expert at using oxygen to make energy, shared its ATP bounty with the host. This event is called endosymbiosis. The bacterium became a permanent resident. Over millions of years, it lost its independence. It transferred most of its DNA to the host cell's nucleus, keeping only a tiny bit for itself. It became what we now call the mitochondria. This origin story is not just a cool piece of trivia. It explains so much. It explains why mitochondria look and act like tiny bacteria living inside our cells. It explains why they have their own DNA, separate from the main DNA in our cell's nucleus. It's a small circle of DNA called mitochondrial DNA or mtDNA, and it contains the blueprints for a few key parts of the power-making machinery. This DNA is passed down almost exclusively from mother to child because the sperm's mitochondria are usually destroyed after fertilization. Your mitochondrial DNA is a direct link to your mother, your grandmother, your great-grandmother, and so on, back through tens of thousands of years of human history. This partnership, this ancient deal, was the single most important step toward complex life. With this new abundant source of energy, cells could get bigger. They could develop new functions. They could stick together and specialize. They could become neurons and skin cells and bone cells. Without this deal, we would still be microscopic slime. The entire animal and plant kingdoms are built on this 2 billion-year-old handshake. So, mitochondria are not just a part of us. They are ancient partners that live within us. And their job description has expanded over the eons. They do a lot more than just make ATP. They also produce heat. When they burn fuel to make ATP, the process isn't 100% efficient. Some of the energy is lost as heat. This isn't a flaw, it's a feature. This heat is what helps keep us warm-blooded. It maintains our body temperature at a stable 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, allowing our enzymes and chemical reactions to run at peak performance. The cold-blooded animals have mitochondria, but their metabolism is slower and they rely on the sun to warm up. Our ability to be active in the cold, to live in diverse climates, is thanks in large part to the heat thrown off by our mitochondria. They are also involved in making important molecules. They are a central hub for cellular metabolism. They help build parts of hemoglobin, the molecule in your red blood cells that carries oxygen. They help synthesize certain hormones. They are a factory for more than just energy. They are a factory for life's building blocks. They also act as a crucial signaling hub. A key role they play is in managing calcium. Calcium ions are a major signal inside cells, telling them when to contract, when to release hormones, when to do their job. Mitochondria can suck up calcium from the cell and release it when needed. They act like a sponge, controlling the calcium levels with incredible precision. This helps regulate a huge number of cellular processes. It's like they are not just the power plant, but also part of the city's traffic control system. And then there is their most profound and perhaps most surprising role. Mitochondria decide when a cell dies. Cells are not meant to live forever. Sometimes a cell gets old, sometimes it gets damaged. Sometimes it gets infected with a virus, or sometimes it becomes cancerous. In these cases, it's better for the whole organism if that one cell is eliminated. The body has a system for this. It's an orderly, programmed cell death called apoptosis. It's a form of cellular suicide, and the mitochondria hold the kill switch. Inside the mitochondria, tucked away, are proteins that can trigger this self-destruct sequence. If the cell receives a certain signal of overwhelming stress or damage, the mitochondria will release these proteins. Once they are out, there is no going back. They set off a chain reaction that neatly dismantles the cell from the inside out. The cell shrinks, its DNA gets chopped up, and it gets packaged into tiny little bags for the immune system to clean up. It's a clean, quiet death that prevents inflammation and damage to neighboring cells. This process is essential. It's what carves out our fingers and toes when we are embryos, killing the cells that form the webbing between them. It's what clears out damaged cells from our organs every single day. When this process goes wrong, it's a disaster. If it doesn't happen enough, damaged and cancerous cells can survive and multiply. If it happens too much, it can lead to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, as healthy brain cells are killed off. So mitochondria are the arbiters of life and death for every one of our cells. They provide the energy for a cell to live, and they hold the tools to make it die. It is an immense responsibility. They are not just our powerhouses, they are our partners, our heaters, our builders, and our executioners. Given all this, the question, could we live without mitochondria, seems even more absurd. No. We need their energy. We need their heat. We need their molecules. We need their control over life and death. A cell that somehow lost all its mitochondria would not only lose its power supply, it would lose a central part of its operating system. It would be a rudderless ship, unable to function or to die properly. When mitochondria don't work right, the results are devastating. There is a whole class of rare genetic conditions known as mitochondrial diseases. These can be caused by mutations in either the nuclear DNA that codes for mitochondrial parts or in the mitochondrial DNA itself. Because mitochondria are in every cell, these diseases can affect any part of the body. But they tend to hit the tissues with the highest energy demands the hardest. The brain, muscles, heart, and liver are often the most affected. The symptoms can include muscle weakness, extreme fatigue, developmental delays, seizures, vision, and hearing loss, and heart problems. It's like living with a constant brownout. The body simply cannot generate enough energy to function properly. There are no cures for these diseases. We can only manage the symptoms. The existence of these terrible conditions is the clearest possible proof of our absolute dependence on healthy, functioning mitochondria. But is this true for all life? Is everything on Earth chained to these ancient bacteria? The answer here gets more complicated. No, not all life needs mitochondria. The simplest forms of life, like most bacteria and another group called archaea, never had them in the first place. They are the descendants of the cells that existed before the Great Merger. They have their own ways of making energy, many of which don't involve oxygen. They are small and simple, and their methods work just fine for them. The real question is about eukaryotes. Eukaryotes are the group of organisms that have complex cells with a nucleus. This includes us, all animals, all plants, all fungi, and single-celled protists like amoebas. For a very long time, scientists believed that all eukaryotes had mitochondria. It was considered a defining feature of the group. Then they started finding weird exceptions. They found single-celled parasites like Giardia lamblia, which causes a nasty intestinal illness. When they first looked at Giardia under a microscope, they couldn't find any mitochondria. Scientists got excited. Maybe this was a truly primitive eukaryote, a living fossil from before the Great Merger. But as our tools got better, they looked closer, and they found that Giardia did have a remnant of a mitochondrion. It was a tiny, pathetic little structure called a mitosome. It couldn't make energy using oxygen. It had lost that ability, but it still performed one of the other essential jobs, helping to build certain iron-sulfur clusters, which are vital components of many proteins. It turned out the cell couldn't get rid of the organelle entirely. Even when the main job of power production was gone, one of the side hustles was so important that the cell had to keep a ghost of its former powerhouse. They found similar stories in other simple eukaryotes. They had lost the power plant function, but they held on to a stripped-down version of the organelle for its other jobs. Well, it seemed that getting rid of mitochondria completely was impossible even for these simple creatures. For decades, it remained a rule of biology. All eukaryotes have mitochondria, or at least a remnant of one. And then in 2016, the rule was broken. Scientists found a creature, a single-celled microbe living in the gut of a chinchilla. Its name was Monocercomonoids. They studied it with every tool they had. They sequenced its entire genome. And they found nothing. No mitochondria, no mitosomes, no remnant organelles, no genes for building or operating mitochondria. Nothing. It was the first eukaryote ever discovered that had truly, completely gotten rid of its mitochondria. So how does it survive? It cheated. It lives in a low oxygen environment, so it doesn't need to breathe. And for that other essential job, building iron-sulfur clusters, it stole the necessary genes from a bacterium through a process called horizontal gene transfer. It basically incorporated a bacterial system into its own cell to do the job its ancestors had outsourced to their mitochondria. It found a way to live without its ancient partner by hiring a new contractor. This discovery was a huge deal. It proved that it is, in fact, possible for a eukaryotic cell to live without mitochondria. But look at what it is. It's a tiny, simple microbe that lives in a very specific, stable environment inside another animal's digestive tract. It's a specialist. It's an outlier. It's the exception that proves the rule for everyone else. Could we, as humans, ever evolve to be like that microbe? The answer is a definitive no. Our cells are vastly larger and more complex. Our energy needs are astronomical in comparison. A human neuron can be 3 feet long. A muscle cell has to contract thousands of times. We are multi-trillion-celled organisms that think and move and maintain a constant body temperature. We can't just, steal a few genes from bacteria and call it a day. Our entire architecture, our entire way of life is built on the high energy output that only mitochondria can provide. To get rid of them would require a complete re-engineering of our biology from the ground up. We would cease to be human, we would cease to be animals. There is one situation where our own cells try to live with less mitochondrial function, and it's a terrifying one: cancer. Cancer cells are famous for their strange metabolism. A scientist named Otto Warburg noticed almost a century ago that many cancer cells seem to prefer that inefficient backup generator method of making energy. Even when there's plenty of oxygen around, they rely heavily on glycolysis, the fast and dirty process that doesn't use mitochondria. This is known as the Warburg effect. For a long time, people thought this meant their mitochondria were broken. But we now know that's not usually the case. Their mitochondria often work just fine. So, why the switch? The answer seems to be about speed and building blocks. Cancer cells are obsessed with one thing: growth. They need to divide and make copies of themselves as fast as possible. While glycolysis makes very little ATP, it does it very quickly. And crucially, the process creates a lot of raw materials, the molecular building blocks that a cell needs to copy its DNA, its fats, and its proteins. So, cancer cells hijack this fast, sloppy pathway not just for energy, but as a factory for spare parts. They sacrifice efficiency for speed and materials. They are not trying to live without mitochondria, but they are changing their reliance on them. And this metabolic shift is now seen as a major hallmark of cancer and a potential weakness that we can target with new therapies. So where does that leave us? We are stuck with our mitochondria, and we should be grateful for it. They are not just cellular machinery, they are the legacy of a 2 billion-year-old pact that made our existence possible. They connect us to some of the earliest life on this planet. The future of medicine is increasingly focused on them. Scientists are exploring ways to treat mitochondrial diseases, of course. One of the most talked about and controversial techniques is mitochondrial donation. It's sometimes called a three-parent baby. If a mother has a mitochondrial disease, this procedure can allow her to have a healthy biological child. It involves taking the nucleus, with all the mother's main DNA, out of her egg and putting it into a donor egg that has had its own nucleus removed. This new egg has the mother's nuclear DNA and the donor's healthy mitochondria. It is then fertilized by the father's sperm. The resulting child has genetic material from 3 people, but over 99.8% of their DNA comes from their mother and father. The tiny amount of mitochondrial DNA from the donor is just enough to ensure the child doesn't inherit a devastating disease. Beyond disease, there is growing interest in how mitochondria affect aging. As we get older, our mitochondria tend to become less efficient. They accumulate damage. This decline in energy production is thought to be a major driver of the aging process, contributing to everything from muscle loss to cognitive decline. Many anti-aging strategies, from diet and exercise to new supplements, are focused on one goal: boosting the health and number of our mitochondria. The idea is simple. If you can keep your power plants running smoothly, the whole city of your body will function better for longer. So, to come back to the beginning, could we live without mitochondria? No, absolutely not. The question itself misunderstands what we are. We are not a single organism, we are a community. We are a walking, talking ecosystem of trillions of cells, and inside each of those cells is another community of hundreds or thousands of ancient bacterial partners. They are the reason we are warm, they are the reason we can move, they are the reason we can think. They connect our breath to our life. The oxygen you just inhaled is, at this very moment, being delivered to your mitochondria. They are using it to burn the remnants of your last meal, generating the ATP that allows your eyes to read these words and your brain to comprehend them. They are so fundamental to our existence that we don't even notice them. They are the power that runs the world inside of us, humming along quietly in the background of every moment of our lives. We could no more live without them than a city could live without power, or a story could exist without a single word.